Hello and welcome to Erik Penser Bank. My name is Ludwig Svensson. I'm an equity analyst here at the bank. With me today I have Klaus Sindahl from Hansa Biopharma. Welcome, Klaus.
Good morning, Ludwig. Nice to be here.
Yeah, good morning. So you just released your Q2 report. What can you tell us about your progress in the second quarter?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so we came in with the second quarter with some good progress on our product sales development. So revenue for the second quarter ended at 36.7 million, whereof roughly 30 million kroner stems from product sales. So this counterbalance a more soft first quarter, but so if you look half year versus half year 2022, we are slightly above last year. But as we have always said, sales is very low and volatile here in the initial phase, but we also have reasons to believe now that we are getting to an end of that phase, and now we're entering into a more accelerated growth territory with market access now obtained in 13 markets and not at least in the 5 most important markets in Europe. So that should be supportive of sales pick up in the second half of the year. Also, it's worth to mention that we have seen the Eurotransplant system undertaking a change to the allocation system, allowing for a specific imlifidase tier of patients. Initially, it's around 20 patients in a pilot, which should also support growth in the second half of the year. It's important to understand that Eurotransplant is one of the major allocation systems in Europe, covering 8 countries, including Benelux, Germany, and select markets in Eastern Europe. So it's quite a win now to see that these allocation systems are adapting to our technology. Also, we have seen that medical guidelines are being implemented in a number of markets. So roughly a year back, ESOT, so the European Society of Organ Transplant, issued a new overall guideline for how to handle these highly sensitized patients, which is sort of the first consensus on patient identification and how to potentially treat them. And that's now being implemented in a number of countries, which is also good and should be supportive of our growth going forward. So here in the second quarter, we have seen UK, Finland, France, Belgium, and the Netherlands issuing new guidelines. So that was sort of kidney transplantation, at least on the commercialization in Europe. If we talk about in the US, then the US ConfIdeS study, which is our pivotal phase 3 program, that continues to enroll patients. As we have said in the past, we will have to over-enroll this study to get to 64 randomized patients, because we are not in control of when patients get randomized and get an organ offer. So we have decided to be proactive here and over-enroll, and we are now at 76 patients, and the target is to randomize 64 patients, which we expect to complete end of the year. Very recently, we have announced that we have obtained provisional approval in Australia. So Australia is a very interesting market. This is a new market for us, and where you see up to 1,000 patients being transplanted every year, and roughly 1,300 to 1,400 patients on the wait list. Australia is not at least exciting because this is the first market where we have actually gotten the label to also transplant from living donors, which will likely expand the pool of organs. So a very exciting time for Australia with that label. And in Australia, we see a good number of patients could be relevant for our technology. So 21% of the patients on the kidney waitlist actually have a CPRA score of 95 and above, which is relevant for our technology. The second quarter was also the quarter where we could announce a third collaboration in gene therapy with Genethon. Genethon is a French research institution, and initially we will do a feasibility program with Genethon, where imlifidase will be investigated to patients with neutralizing antibodies in an indication called Crigler-Najjar. It's an ultra-rare indication. And that collaboration will start right now, and we will hopefully be able to fast forward so we can get into the clinic already next year. As some of you may recall, Geneton was co-authoring a paper issued in Nature a few years back, where they tested imlifidase in conjunction with the gene therapy with very encouraging preclinical data. So it's a big win for us to now be able to continue with Geneton in a real collaboration. Then we have also highlighted yesterday that we will commence a new study in an autoimmune indication called ANCA-associated vasculitis. And this is a phase 2 program, which is sponsored by a hospital in Berlin, Charité. And that study will initially target 10 patients with ANCA-associated vasculitis and patients who have developed acute respiratory distress syndrome due to pulmonary hemorrhage. And this is something we see with an incidence rate of 3 in 100,000. And then there's a subgroup here where we are going to investigate. But this is very, very exciting. This is the third autoimmune program we will now initiate. We also have anti-GBM and TBS. So I think with that, I'll hand back to Ludwig to continue asking questions.
Yeah. So in conclusion, it was a very busy quarter for you.
Absolutely. I mean, this is, the world of biotech, right? I mean, we had a fairly slow first quarter, but then, I mean, things really picked up in the second quarter. It's always a bit unpredictable, but it also makes it exciting.
All right, back to the report that you released today. Sales in the quarter was in line with the consensus estimate, but the EBIT was a bit weighted down by higher cost than expected. Can you tell us about the increased activities during the quarter?
Yeah, so actually both SG&A and R&D activities or expenses increased somewhat in the second quarter. We have always said that we will increase SG&A because we have higher activity level. I mean, we are launching in a number of new markets and we are building up an organization. Also, we've started to do that in our preparations, at least in the US. So that's sort of expected. Also, we have set or guided to the market that inflation will be a factor this year. And inflation, as you have known, has reached very high levels over the last periods. But what is maybe surprising or came as unexpected was, of course, the FX impact. So the Swedish krona has been somewhat devaluated versus the US dollar and the euro, and that's also an impact of the increased expenses here in the second quarter. And that actually also goes for the R&D side. R&D has normally been fairly flat, but the R&D is picking up now due to inflation, due to currency, but also due to the fact that we are increasing our activity levels. So we went from 1 clinic in anti-GBM to 12 clinics in the second quarter, and we'll continue to step up our engagement with new clinics for that program. Also in US Confides, so the pivotal phase 3 program in kidney transplantation in the US, we aim to have 20 clinics up and running. So those effects in combination makes up the higher cost for the quarter.
That makes sense, Klaus. Thank you. And how should we think about the gross margins going forward? They seem to fluctuate a lot between the quarters. Do you have any guidance for long-term gross margins for the product, or is this too early to say?
Yeah, so for the time being, gross margins are expected to remain very volatile between quarters. And the thing is that our product has a shelf lifetime of 18 months, then it needs to be replaced, and it's produced in batches. So let's say that we are producing thousands of vials. Of course, a number of these will be obsolete because it's not all of them going to hospitals. So we have these cycles. So here in the initial phase of the launch and the initial years of our commercializations, the gross margin will remain fairly volatile until we have gotten to a point where it's more steady. And long term, we are quite convinced that we will have very solid and good gross margins, but it's still too early to use current level as a marker for our long-term profitability.
Great, thanks. That's helpful. Okay, Klaus, that was everything for me. Thank you for the interview.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
Bye-bye.